All right, protests continue in Akron, Ohio, after the city released body cam footage of the moment unarmed 25-year-old Jayland Walker was gunned down by police officers, piercing his body with 60 bullets. That was after firing 90. And why did all this take place? Because Akron police say that Walker refused to stop during a routine traffic stop, then led officers on a chase, and police say that he fired a shot from his car. Now, we do want to show you some of that body cam footage just so you understand the magnitude of this heart-wrenching situation. And I want to warn you that the footage is extremely disturbing, but I think it is necessary to put on display what happened to Jayland Walker. Take a look.
He's slowing down here, slowing down. Stop. Move the car. Move! 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 Show me your hands! Show me your hands!
Sounds like a war zone. Joining me now to discuss is Brittany Packnett-Cunningham. She's host of the Undistracted podcast. Cheryl Dorsey is also with us, a retired LAPD police sergeant and the author of The Confidence Chronicles. And very honored to have Demetrius Travis Sr. He's the cousin of Jayland Walker. And Demetrius, I do want to start with you. First, I'm sorry that you just had to sit through that video and audio of seeing what happened. It's devastating for us to hear. I can't imagine how it feels for you to relive that trauma. But we want to know how your family is doing and just to acknowledge the humanity, the human being that Jayland Walker was. What do you want the world to know about Jayland?
Thanks for having me on here and shedding this light. Our family is heartbroken. Jayland's a very, very, very good kid. Like we couldn't imagine this happening to him, you know. Jayland was a quiet kid, a funny kid. I don't even recall Jayland ever being in any trouble. So
I want to show the, I know this is difficult for you. I want to show the last text exchange, Demetrius, that you had with your cousin. Just because it shows there was a person behind the hashtag that everybody is so upset about. And you kind of get a sense of his personality. And I think, you know, reading this text, so many of us have family members and people who we can envision this happening to. Why do you think this happened to Jayland, the way this whole thing unfolded? Just your thoughts on how the police handled the situation.
Well, to me, it's not a thing that's set directly on Akron, Ohio. It's an American thing. It's a America problem in the way that they've always poisoned people to believe that the Black culture is a dangerous culture. And I mean, what they did was they made it a mission to be judge, jury, and executioner.
Yeah. Officer Dorsey, I want to bring you in the conversation here because looking at this, it is hard to imagine. Like, there just seems there is no justification. That video sounded like a war zone. We froze it and let the audio play. And when you hear those bullets whisking by, whatever crime he's alleged to or accused of committing, I don't understand a circumstance where this man's body had to be pierced with 60 bullets after being fired at by multiple officers nearly 100 times. How many ways did the police go wrong here?
Well, I often say that poor tactics can lead to a poor shooting. And while I don't know whether or not these officers had a plan, it would seem to me that they didn't. Certainly, there should have been some communication about what you might do in the course of your shift if you encounter a certain thing, an armed suspect who's allegedly fired a shot at you. There's no reason if 8 officers are chasing him on foot for all 8 to discharge their weapon. And while the police chief is saying all the right things on camera, every round has to be accounted for, this is true. Understand and know this, he has total autonomy with regards to how he's going to handle this and adjudicate this internal investigation administratively when the officers say he fired around at me, or I was in fear for my safety, which is the go-to phrase. It's very difficult to argue with what's in someone's head. And so while the optics are bad, I think that this was certainly excessive. And we've seen police officers use restraint when the suspect looks like them, Bobby Cremo Jr., taken into custody, flee and arrest, armed with a weapon, having killed many, having wounded many, and they showed tremendous restraint. So we know that it's possible and doable.
Well, let's show that. We actually did a juxtaposition here because the Highland Park shooter, who was white, 21 years old, left alive. He was armed. He was arrested peacefully. Jayland Walker, who you saw running away, was essentially a target practice here. Brittany, you and I have talked about this on this very show so many times, in our group chat 1,000 times, in our personal friendship 1,000 times. It's absolutely exhausting. And I do wonder, it's like we've become somewhat immune to mass shootings. And I do wonder if this is just where we are in this country, that every few weeks there's going to be yet another killing of an unarmed black man. That can only last for so long. Free people will not stand for being murdered repeatedly. I just wonder, because you've been in this work for decades now, what is the next step to bringing this kind of senseless violence and murder of our men to a screeching halt? And women, by the way.
That's right. Well, before I say that, first of all, Mr. Travis, my sincerest condolences to your family. I am so sorry that Jayland's name has to be added to this ever-growing list. Tiffany, I'm grateful that you are helping to humanize Jayland and remind us that he was a living, breathing person with people who loved him and people he loved. So often our victims are the ones who end up getting put on trial. And I'm also grateful, Tiffany, that you remind us that just because the police said something does not necessarily make it true. And Uvalde, I think, is a continual resounding reminder that often the claims of police do not bear out when our people are the victims. But to your question, Tiffany, about what the next step has to be. The next step has to be for us to fully connect the dots, that this is not just a Black community's problem or the brown community's problem or the indigenous community's problem or a problem of inner cities or a problem even just of disabled people. Like Mr. Travis said, this is an American problem. We need to understand that every time the police decide to play judge, jury, and executioner, that it's not only the dereliction of duty of a so-called public servant and an officer of supposed public safety, but that ultimately it is a denial of democracy. Police are armed agents of the state, and a place where agents of the state get to decide who lives and who dies, I'm sad to say, is not a democracy. People think so often this couldn't possibly be me. I comply or I live in the right neighborhood, but it can be you. The police have already been deputized to criminalize people who have abortions. Teachers who decide to teach real history could be next. This will always be about the state imposing their will on the rest of us, and that means America's contract with its people has never been fulfilled. So the next step has to be for us to fully connect this dot and to make sure that we never rest until democracy is actually the name of the game and no longer are police being funded to cause crime in our communities.
Thank you so much, Brittany, for putting that into perspective. This is a conversation that requires more time, and sadly, we are out of it. So thank you, Brittany, for that sermon on this Saturday morning. And Officer Dorsey, thank you for giving us very important context. And Demetrius, I just want to say to you, we are thinking of you and your family, and I'm so sorry that you're going through this, but we do want to highlight who Jayland Walker was, and we stand with you in your grief, and just sorry that you're going through this. And thank you for being with us this Saturday morning.